Well, folks, we're back with some more new cards. This is March of the Lich King Part 2, and we've got a lot of neutral cards, some catch up on some Death Knight cards, and a shiny new legendary here with Astalor Bloodsworn, a new 2-mana 2/2 battlecry. Add Astalor the Protector to your hand and Mana Thirst 4, deal 2 damage, and then you get your 5-mana Astalor here, Battlecry, add Astalor the Flamebringer to your hand, Mana Thirst 7, gain 5 armor. And finally, Astalor the Flamebringer is the real prize here. 8-mana 8/8 Battlecry, deal 8 damage, randomly split between all enemies. Mana Thirst 10, deal 8 more. So that final step is a really big 16 damage worth of missiles, and I think that's awesome. Can both be a lethal threat sometimes on an empty board. That's just a ridiculous amount of damage in a single 8-mana card. And sometimes if they have a board, he'll serve as a really nice board clear. Just clean up all that stuff and drop an 8/8, and that's going to feel like a great swing turn. And all in all, this card just packs a lot of value into a single 2-mana card, which I think is going to be great for things like Renathal decks. A lot of control decks will be able to run this successfully as well, I suspect. Now, of course, there is a little bit of a setup here to get to that final step of Astalor. The question is, are you sacrificing a lot to get there? I don't think so. I don't think that the mana costs on these first 2 halves are so prohibitive that it's going to be an issue. And frankly, I think sometimes it's going to be okay to sacrifice their Mana Thirst. If you just want to play them on curve, I don't really need 2 damage right now. That's fine. I'm just going to play Astalor, weave him in so that I'm getting the Protector. I think, you're for sure going to want to realize the bonuses on the Flamebringer there. Although sometimes that 8 damage in the first half might be lethal in its own right. So maybe you won't, but I think most often you will. But, if you want to play the Astalor the Protector on turn 5, just get a 5/5 down and set up for later. I think that's going to be totally okay. Also, I could easily see this being something where you play the first 2 halves on turn 7. You just wait until 7 and you bake them both into the same turn, because that's going to make sure the Mana Thirst for Astalor the Protector is ready as well. Now, a couple little technical things here. The Mana Thirst is a different keyword than Battlecry, so you can play this with Bran. You can get extra copies of stuff, but I do not believe Bran will be duplicating the Mana Thirst aspect. We have more evidence for a card later that has an effect with no Battlecry. So I don't think you're gonna get, say, 32 damage off Astalor the Flamebringer if you somehow combined it with Bran with a little bit of extra mana. But of course you would be getting 16 off the Battlecry being doubled, and then an additional 8 still for 24 damage, which isn't too bad. And then Bran can obviously offer you lots of extra Astalors along the way if you manage to do that as well. So all in all, I really like this card. I actually think this has really nice plays, some ways to keep up as you play the first halves of these, a little bit of life gain, a little bit of board swing. Those cards don't look great on their own. I mean, actually, Astalor Bloodsworn at Mana Thirst 4, if you're playing in post 4 mana, it's pretty good. But Astalor the Protector doesn't look amazing on its own, but it's fine. It's a playable card, and then you get to the final prize there, and I think that's amazing. And I think a lot of decks will be happy to do that. So I think Astalor Bloodsworn is actually very likely to get played quite a bit. So now we've got some neutral Blood Elf characters, like the Bloody Knight here, 3-mana 4/5. At the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to your hero. So big stat line here for 3 mana. Could be nice in some more aggressively minded decks, just trying to get some stuff down and start whacking the opponent. 5 health in particular, I think, is a pretty good break point. Sometimes that's a hard number to deal with that early in the game. It's notably more than 3/4, even though it's only 1 extra health, which I like. And there is some potential upside here for damage-based decks, things like Warlock, Demon Seed style plays, where you're looking to damage yourself. This could encourage a subtle, slight return to Demon Seed Warlock. I don't think a card like this would be nearly enough in its own right. Warlock would need some additional help, but that is an angle for this guy to get played. I don't think a 4/5 is going to be worth it for most aggro decks, though. They're often far more synergy driven. They care about game plans being developed as opposed to just big stat dumps on board. But if there's an aggro deck that doesn't have a great synergy line, but has like a few really powerful aggro things you're looking to do, a great weapon, just like some really good early game minions, this could make it to the end of a list. I don't think that's absolutely impossible. Like, I'm just looking for some filler stuff. I need a few more cards to extend my aggro game plan. There's not a lot available, and sure enough, a 4/5 is good enough for me. I don't care about the 2 damage because I'm an aggro deck. So I think there is a small chance there Bloody Knight actually makes the cut in a deck for what would otherwise be, I think, just a pretty flat neutral card, but keep an eye out. All right, so next up, the Hawkstrider Rancher, freshly revealed 3-mana 2/5. After you play a minion, give it +1/+1, and Death Rattle summon a 1/1 Hawkstrider. And man, that's a lot of effects on this card. I was kind of expecting, you know, the typical arena filler neutral stuff that's good in arena, nowhere else, but this card has me really intrigued. At 5 health, I think this has a decent chance to stick on board. That's often a very hard health total to deal with that early in the game. And then play a couple minions afterwards. You're getting some immediate buffs and the stickiness in this this Hawkstrider as well, which is great for token decks to have those backup boards to redevelop on, to rebuff on. It's great for Infuse. It's great for corpses, for Death Knight. Like, I'm seeing 3 or 4 different angles here for the Rancher. It does say you have to play the minion instead of summon it, so that might negate a little bit of the wide board stuff that some decks are looking to do. But I still think, man, playing you know, a couple 2-drops, playing a couple 1-drops, and you're gonna get some value out of this. This is gonna return, and it's still gonna demand your opponent deals with it. You know, it's like the stuff you summoned is probably second to this. So this awkward 5 health still has to be answered in some ways. I wouldn't sleep on this card. This actually looks surprisingly powerful to me for a random neutral here. Moving on to the Translocation Instructor, a 5-mana 4/4 battlecry. Choose an enemy minion, swap it with a random one in their deck. So some disruption potential here. You could pull something scary out of their deck, some combo piece, some battle cry they're trying to get value out of, and it's just sitting there like a lame duck on board and doesn't get to do the thing it was intended to do. But of course, that's going to be pretty inconsistent, hard to really get that to deliver. We've actually seen the 5-cost card that just came out in the mini set, Maul and Disorder, and it's kind of doing the same sort of thing, pulling stuff from their deck, and it's just not that good. And you even get that minion in this case. So there's also the world where this is like a removal card. You take something big on board and you play this and you turn their 8/8 into the 1/1 from their deck. That would be a nice upside as well on top of the combo disruption. But again, really inconsistent. On average, you're going to get an average result here, and then you've spent 5 mana 4/4 to, on average, do very little. And I don't think the high rolls here are going to be often enough or big enough that the average result is outweighed by them, because the average result's pretty bad. You're going to take the average minion in their deck and turn it into the average minion in their deck, and you will have done nothing except make a 4/4, and that's bad on average. And most decks aren't going to want to do that. They're going to have better ways to remove stuff, better ways to disrupt stuff. This is just a really expensive way to do the same thing very inconsistently. Moving here to the Coroner, a 2-mana 2/2 battlecry. Freeze an enemy minion, mana thirst 6, silence it first. So we got this cheap freeze. This is kind of like Glacial Shard type plays of old. We've had some powerful cheap freezes, but this only freezes enemy minions. It doesn't freeze face, and I think that's actually a really important loss. Being able to play that Glacial Shard to lock down a weapon sometimes would be really nice to shut down some damage, shut down, you know, attack activations, whatever it is. That was important, and this can't do that. It can only freeze minions, so that gives me pause right away. Then you've got this mana thirst 6. You can silence the minion first, so it's, you know, late in a game, bundling together silence and freeze, so you can silence off some effect and then like say, okay, that's also getting frozen, I'm not dealing with it. So, you know, take their big 8/8 death rattle, silence it and freeze it and buy yourself some time. I mean, yeah, obviously there's some use cases for that, clearly, but are there better use cases? Would you rather just run a Starfish and removal, you know? Like, can you commit a deck slot to this guy? I'm not really feeling that you can. The fact that you can't freeze face really bugs me. I feel like that's a bigger downside than most people might want to admit. And I think the delayed silence here, although fine, is also just another mark against this card. I feel like there are better ways to do what this card does. And the fact that it's trying to bundle these together doesn't really seem that relevant or offer that much upside. So I normally like really cheap freeze effects, but for some reason the Coroner's rubbing me the wrong way. I'm not sure I'm buying into this one. And then next up here we have the Silver Moon Armorer, a 4-mana 4/4 with Rush and mana thirst 7, gain +2/+2. So on turn 4, not exciting. We've had a lot of 4/4 or better rushes, frankly, in Hearthstone that didn't get played. That's often just not enough these days, and that's not going to be good on turn 4. And then if you wait until turn 7 with this mana thirst 7, it's a 6/6 instead, which frankly still isn't that exciting. Like, yeah, it's better than a 4-mana card, but it's later in the game, stats matter less, synergies aren't there. It's just nobody has a reason to run this. This looks like a great arena card. I'm sure arena will be all about this one, but in standard constructed Hearthstone, Silver Moon Armor just won't make the cut. Next up, we've got the Amber Whelp here, a new 3-mana 3/3 dragon with Battlecry. If you're holding a dragon, deal 3 damage. Man, we've had so many like SI7 agent shaped cards. Even Astalor there was doing the same sort of effect. And this one's good. This is just straight up better than like Scale Rider of old. That was the same exact effect, but it dealt 2 damage, and 3 obviously much better. That's another breakpoint conversation where there are a lot of 3/3s in the world, so 3 versus 2 is a big deal. Particularly at 3 mana. Now, clearly, this is going to demand a dragon deck. You're going to have some dragons to make this thing worth it. There aren't currently a lot of dragon decks in the world. Priest can do some dragony things. They've got a few dragon synergy cards, but that doesn't mean there won't always be. I don't expect this card to pop off now. I don't think we're going to get a lot of dragons just based on the theming of this set, but couple expansions down the road, who knows? This is one you keep in your back pocket, wait for some more dragons to get printed, and suddenly the Amber Whelp becomes a really good card because of its early game swing potential, its reach potential late in the game as well. This would probably be a staple dragon card if a dragon deck or 2 popped up, so keep an eye on it yet again. Moving on to the Sanctum Spellbinder here, a new 4-mana 3/6. Whenever your opponent targets another minion with a spell, redirect it to this. So literally Mage's Spellbinder secret, but it's just a minion on board. And if they want to remove something else, too bad, you gotta hit the Sanctum Spellbinder instead. And there are worlds where that can be disruptive. Obviously, if you play like some key minion down your opponent really needs to deal with, let's talk about a Bran, right? That came to mind. We've been talking about Bran. It's like, I really need to deal with that Bran, or they're going to pop off next turn. They're going to do something crazy. Oh no, they've got a Sanctum Spellbinder with it. I can't kill the Bran. All my removals being wasted on a stupid 6 health Sanctum Spellbinder. And yeah, I kind of get it, but at the same time, man, 4 mana is a really big tax for that kind of effect. And there are a lot of other ways to deal with minions these days with rush minions and just universal board clears and stuff that aren't targeted. So I'm not really buying this effect. I don't think it's worth 4 mana for this one. I don't think the disruption potential is quite high enough. For me, Sanctum Spellbinder feels like most decks just won't be able to run this. They'll be looking to do more proactive things, more synergistic things, and the Spellbinder will be very bottom of mind when you're building most decks. So next up here is the Crystal Broker, a 3-mana 3/2 neutral, mana thirst 5, summon a random 3-cost minion, mana thirst 10, summon an 8-cost minion instead. So you play this on turn 3, you're very sad. It's a Bloodfin Raptor. You play this on turn 5, I think you're still sad, honestly. I think a random 3-drop's not going to be very good on average. It will probably have been worth 3 mana at that stage, but still not more exciting than spending your mana on other things. There's opportunity cost to overcome. Mana Thirst 10, if you play this on turn 10, I mean, yes, that is very efficient to get a random 8-drop on turn 10, but still, it is incredibly inconsistent. It is incredibly unsynergistic. I don't know why decks would need to do that. Once you get to turn 10, just getting random stats on board is not really much of a game plan or exciting. I'm sure it's nice in Arena. Like, I could see this being an insane Arena card because it's probably decent in the early to mid game and then also really good if you like top deck it late. But in Standard, this just does not fit into people's game plans. I do not think this is a card we're going to see at all. I guess there's a tiny chance that like an Evolve deck wants to use this, but Evolve decks are really good at snowballing and turning early to mid game stuff into those like overwhelming swarm boards, and that doesn't really fit this Mana Thirst to game plan that well, I don't think. So for me, I don't even think it really looks like a good Evolve setup either, because it just comes a little bit too late for what would make it powerful. So all that said, I don't think Crystal Broker is very good. So next up is the Silvermoon Arcanist, a new 3-mana 2/2 spell damage +2. Battlecry, your spells can't target heroes this turn. So we got a spell damage card that could be great for setting up some like lethal combo finisher type stuff, but it can't go face. So only untargeted spells could go face. There are a few of those, the Sinister Strikes of the world, where you don't need to target it, but man, I don't think that's gonna work very well. Most damage spells are going to be targeted if they want to go face. So what you'd have to do with the Silvermoon Arcanist if you really wanted to make this one work is keep it around for next turn, somehow give it stealth, somehow protect it in some way or another, so that you have spell damage for the following turn. But then it's like, well, why am I not just running the other great spell damage cards we have? There are already a bunch of cards that have done the same sort of thing, and they're usually 4 mana. So you're getting a 1 mana discount, but it demands a lot more setup if you're looking to use it as a lethal kind of card. So I don't really see this as a combo enabler or setup of any kind at all. So then you're left to say, okay, well, is this worth it for like clearing minions? Okay, like you can get extra damage on your, AoE effects, your single target damage spells, your Drain Souls hitting for 5 or whatever. All right, that's interesting. But we're about to see a card that makes that look so useless. There's a card that's going to do that even better in this review. So I just don't really see a home for Silvermoon Arcanist. I think there are other cards in both directions that do things better than this one. It's going to be really hard to make this work well. And here it is, said card, the Enchanter. It's a 3-mana 3/3. Enemy minions take double damage during your turn. So if you're looking to clear minions, if you want to use your Drain Souls or some of your new Lifesteal spells in Death Knight to get like crazy heals off of them, much like we used to see with the Moarg Artificer back in the day, the demon, the 2/4 that would double damage from spells on minions. The Enchanter is doing that exact effect. It's only hitting enemies here, so doesn't have the kind of risk of the Moarg where your opponent would get the turn back and then be able to clear your stuff very effectively, which was actually usually a benefit for the Moarg because of Lifesteal Demon Hunter OTKs killing off their own minions. That's probably not a concern right now, though. We don't expect that kind of deck to pop up. So Enchanter, most cases, looks just better, honestly, than the Moarg Artificer in an effect regard there, allowing you to take, some really big swings. Your AoEs become way more powerful. That's great for control decks. Your single target damage spells, if they have any kind of upside life, like Lifesteal, become really, really impactful and effectful, both, trading up their ability to clear things, but also the upside of any effect that they might have. And, I didn't really think Moarg Artificer was a great card when it got revealed. It ended up proving me super wrong. Was an awesome card. I'm going to buy in on this one early. I think the Enchanter actually makes sense for the very same reasons. And although this is a little bit more expensive than the original version of Moarg before it got nerfed, I think 3 mana is still quite acceptable for a lot of decks. And particularly with Lifesteal floating around, I could see this card being a big swing enabler effectively. And keep in mind, it's not just good with spells. There's also just trades on board, rush minions. There's a lot of other upsides here for the Enchanter. So I think this actually looks really good. I think this is going to get some play. All right, so next up, we're going to circle back to these Death Knight cards. I talked about these and more or less reviewed them without giving them a score in my Death Knight videos, but these are technically a part of the March of the Lich King expansion, so I wanted to include them in this video. So Alexandros Mograine, as a reminder, triple blood rune, 7 mana, 7/7 undead, battlecry for the rest of the game, deal 3 damage to your opponent at the end of your turns. So this is a damage over time that's just going to chip away at your opponent's health total. If you live long enough, if you play the game long enough, Alexandros is theoretically going to win you the game. Now, my hesitations with Alexandros Mograine are basically that it's going to take a long time for him to win you the game, so you're investing this 7 mana now in something that doesn't pay off for, maybe 5, even 10 turns, right? And I think that's an effect that's going to be best in control matchups, control versus control, because other decks, like if you're playing an aggro deck, right, you're probably just better off playing a 7 mana card that stabilizes you the board. I play a board clear and you're out of stuff and I win with counter pressure and I don't need Mograine to finish the game because I'm just going to plop down a bunch of big minions and whack you in the face because you ran out of threats. And if you're playing in a combo deck environment, they're going to kill you before you get your Mograine to do anything significant, right? That 3 damage is not going to add up fast enough. So when would this be best? In an attrition-based control versus control grind out, where you're both looking to go long in the game and this whittles people down. But here's my thought. If you're doing that, those decks tend to have a lot of healing. They tend to have survivability cards and healing cards. If you're playing against a priest, for instance, their hero power is more or less going to negate Mograine. You're going to net 1 damage per turn over their base hero power. And obviously, it's not like you just stop playing the game. You're still going to be doing other things. You're hoping that this chip damage accumulates enough that you can find other lethal opportunities. I get it. But is that still worth that 7 mana tax at the front? Were you happy to play the Mograine? And the control matchup probably didn't hurt to play 7 mana 7/7. Probably fine. You probably had a window where you could squeeze that in. But could you have ran another card that did more, that advanced your game plan or advanced your value more than this does with this damage over time effect? Those are the questions I have. So basically, I think in 2/3 of your matchups, this isn't going to be a necessary win condition. You're going to have other better things to do. You're going to win the game faster, and you'd be better off spending your mana on something more direct and more immediate. And then in the third case, when this is potentially advantageous, I worry that other decks aren't going to be that bothered by it. I think they're just going to be like, okay, whatever, 3 damage, I can live through this. I've got 70 armor or whatever, and I'm still going to grind you out over time. And my hero power button with warrior or priest or whatever is mostly negating your Mograine. So for me, I'm sure there will be a deck that runs this early in the Death Knight lifespan because there just aren't a lot of things to do. If you're triple blood anyway, you throw in Mograine in. You don't have an endless supply of cards. So do I think Mograine's going to get played? Yes. Do I think he's going to be really fundamental to the deck's game plan? No. Do I think he's going to be the star of the show? No. Do I think people are going to dread seeing Mograine? Very rarely. So, you know, playable, but not the star. And that makes me sad. I would love for this card to be amazing. I would play the crap out of this. I love designs like this. I love grindy games. I love attrition. I love like the sense of impending doom that sometimes exists in Hearthstone, and this is not an overwhelming sense of impending doom either. So, you know, I would give anything for this card to be great, but I don't think it's going to be. I think it's just going to feel okay at best early in Death Knight's lifespan, and then it's going to fall off rather quickly as more cards and more win conditions arrive for the class. All right, next up here is Blightfang, another legendary for Death Knight. I like this one a little more. 3-mana 3/3 beast. Battlecry, infect all enemies with Death Rattle. Summon a 2/2 zombie with taunt for your opponent. Now, this has already been confirmed to get a wording change just to clarify how this works, but has functionally remained the same. They haven't changed any functionality. So just to explain how this works in case it's confusing. Your opponent has 3 3/3s on board. You play the Blightfang. Each of those 3/3s are going to get a Death Rattle that summons a 2/2 with taunt for you, because you become the opponent for those minions. So this is used as a way to punish your opponent going wide on board. You're basically giving a Soul of the Forest to their minions, is I guess a good way to put it. But yours have taunt, which is nice. And what that means is you plop Blightfang down anytime you're a little bit behind on board, and this gives you a lot of bodies, and disruptive bodies at that, because they have taunt. And that also means a lot of corpses, of course, for Demon Hunter, and getting a lot of bodies is great for unholy decks. We found they have a lot of wide board buffs. So all in all, anytime you fall behind a little bit, Blightfang allows you the ability to recover pretty nicely and then like swing it back in your favor pretty hard, I think, with all these extra 2/2s. It does demand that you kill those minions off, so if you're too far behind, it might not be good, but I don't think that'll be a huge risk, and I think you'll have ways to do that, just kind of chipping through their stuff, maybe just 1 OE or something in your deck, whether that's from Unholy or from another rune, probably. Some way to recover a little bit. And then boom, you're back ahead. Boom, you have a bunch of 2/2s, and you're rolling again on your game plan. And I don't think it takes a lot of minions to make Blightfang good. I think, you know, 2+ makes Blightfang feel pretty nice, because you're getting a 3/3 with a couple 2/2s. That's not bad for 3 mana. Even 1 minion's not disastrous, I would say. If they have 1 minion on board, you get a 3/3 and a 2/2. That's not bad. And then the upside, as they get more and more, of course, can become even higher. So I think this will be fine in Unholy decks. You toss it in, you get some extra 2/2 sometimes. The Blightfang itself is not a huge sacrifice. So I do see this getting some play. And the potential for high corpses and punishing your opponent is pretty nice. So all in all, looks good. So next up here, we have the Meat Grinder, 3-mana 3/4 mech, single Unholy Rune, Battlecry, shred a random minion in your deck to gain 3 corpses. So you're sacrificing a minion in your deck. That's not going to matter. You don't care. That was at the bottom of your deck anyway, functionally. And even if you hit a legendary, whatever, I wasn't going to draw that anyway. And you're not going to fatigue, so the total card count's not going to matter much in Unholy. So basically, this is just saying a 3-mana 3/4 that gives you 3 corpses. And it's really hard to get a read on how important that's going to be. We have certainly seen some cards that demand corpse payoffs in Unholy. Some of the better mid-game cards do demand corpses, so Meat Grinder might be important for that. You might just need ways to do that. The question is, if you just played another thing that made multiple minions, would it be a better way to get 3 corpses back? Because, you know, if I just play a thing that makes 4 minions, that's 4 corpses anyway, and this is the Meat Grinder's 4 corpses effectively in total. So is that just a better game plan, or maybe you just need both because you need enough cards? I think for now you probably need both. I think this is a good little corpse engine, and the 3/4 stat line is fine these days. Not exciting. Nobody loves to play Renathal, but the upside here might be worth enough that the Meat Grinder does indeed make the cut. So next up's a crazy card, the Soul Stealer, 8 mana, triple blood rune, 5/5 undead, Battlecry, destroy all other minions, gain 1 corpse for each enemy destroyed. That means this is a Twisting Nether that leaves a body behind, ultimate swing there on board, and it's going to gain you corpses for enemies destroyed as well, which for Blood Death Knight might be important. They don't have as many ways to make corpses, particularly triple blood in this case. So really great board clear, stabilizer tool, dream control card. We still see higher cost Board clears like this getting played in Hearthstone from time to time, particularly with this one being so swingy and having the upside of the corpses. I think that's a recipe for a lot of success. If a triple Blood Knight deck takes off at all, this is probably the reason you're doing it. Having a really powerful late game stabilizer like this one feels very good. So I think this Wholesaler is going to be amazing. Finally, the Bone Guard Commander here is an 8-mana single blood rune, 8/8 undead. Taunt, Battlecry raise up to 6 corpses as 1/2 Risen Footman with Taunt. So a big old board of stuff here, but not that big, right? They're only 1/2s, which I think could be what holds this card back. It does have those kind of spreading plague vibes, like I'm just going to build a big wall of taunts and you got to deal with it, particularly because this is an 8/8 taunt itself. And that's a lot of stuff, but I think for standard Hearthstone, the turns where that style of play would be most impactful are a little bit earlier than turn 8. In other words, I'm using this to shut down my opponent's minion swarm for aggro druid or whatever future equivalent you might see. And I think doing that by turn 8 is a little late. You've probably already started to turn the corner a fair bit. You've already had some board clears that are going to take care of those problems. And then the Bone Guard Commander doesn't really represent enough counter pressure threat either. It's one of those cards where it's like, yeah, okay, if I get to turn 8 and I have this in hand, sure, I'm going to play it. But how long was it sitting dead in hand? Was it better off having another card in that slot instead? Something that helped me keep up in the early game instead, right? So don't think about like the best case scenario for this where it's like, oh yeah, okay, it's turn 8, I'll play this. That's fine. Think about what you had to sacrifice along the way. And if you had a better card instead, a cheaper card, better removal, would that have better suited those scenarios? I think probably most of the time, yeah. So Bone Guard Commander, again, another style of card I love. I want this to be good so bad. I love cards like this. Just let me taunt up forever, right? I want to just taunt up till the end of my days. But I think comes in a little bit late for what it's best at, and therefore most decks will find a little bit faster ways to respond to opponents' wide boards. And, you know, like I've said in the previous, when I talked about this in the previous review, if this were more threatening on board, if this made 3/4s or something, right? Like, obviously that would be maybe too good, but even if it made like 3 or 4 4s or 4 4/4s or something, a more moderate amount of bigger minions, I think it would present a better counter pressure threat. And then you could use this after stabilizing to say, okay, now is when I kill you. I'm gonna start making these big boards. They're still defensive in nature a little bit, but I can actually use these to hit you really hard. And I don't know that the 1/2s really offer that. And they're just a little bit too susceptible to all kinds of AoE in control matchups. Like suddenly the rankers of the world, the Death Knight removal of the world, all just eat these so easily that they don't really even work in a control matchup either. So all in all, fun card. I'm gonna love playing this, but I don't think great, unfortunately. So this is Necrotic Mortician, 2-mana, 2/3, double unholy. Battlecry: if a friendly undead died after your last turn, discover an unholy rune card. So a little bit of a value generator here in the double unholy set. These kinds of cards have been fine in Hearthstone. There are all kinds of decks that run these like little discover a thing cards. That said, they are usually in more control oriented builds, late game oriented builds, where you kind of want to play an early speed bump and then have something to play later. I don't know if that's going to fit super well into the unholy game plan, which seems to be a lot more swarm based, token minion based, a little bit more aggressively slanted, looking for finishers, setting up for corpse gains, which I don't know that the Necrotic Mortician sets up very well comparatively to some of the like undead swarmy reborn stuff. Also, I don't know if this is missing an undead tag. Do I have a bad art? Is this supposed to be undead? Because feels like it should. And then that said, there's a conditionality here with the undead aspect of this as well, which I think limits the Mortician too. I think we've seen other versions of this in like Blood, for instance, that make way more sense to me. I think they fit the game plan better. The conditionality isn't as tough of a check. So the Necrotic Mortician, I think, falls a little short compared to some of its peers in that regard. Astalor Bloodsworn is a 4-star card. Hawkstrider Rancher is a 4-star card. Translocation Instructor is a 2-star card. Coroner is a 2-star card. Silvermoon Armor is a 1-star card. Bloodied Knight is a 3-star card. Amber Whelp is a 3-star card. Sanctum Spellbender is a 1-star card. Crystal Broker is a 2-star card. Silvermoon Arcanist is a 1-star card. Enchanter is a 4-star card. Alexandros Mograine is a 3-star card. Meat Grinder is a 3-star card. Lightfang is a 4-star card. Soul Stealer is a 5-star card. Bone Guard Commander is a 2-star card. Necrotic Mortician is a 2-star card. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for this review. Curious what you think. I almost gave Astalor Bloodsworn 5 stars. You think Astalor is a 5-star card, or is he going to stick to 4? I'm Let's take it 4, but I think he's pretty good. I think a lot of decks are going to run this. Has that kind of Renathal deck vibe. So as long as there are Renathal decks out there, I think a lot of them will play Astalor, but ultimately didn't seem quite as good as some of the other, you know, staple neutrals we have right now. But curious what you think, good or bad. That said, share your thoughts on all these cards and more in the comments below. Thanks so much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.